Good evening, folks, and welcome back to the Warwolf Podcast. This is going to be a special episode. We're going to be commenting on the vice presidential debates tonight. Very long day, 10-hour day at the new job, which went swimmingly, so good times. Dale, how are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing pretty good. After a lot of bullshit technical difficulties, I'm glad we finally
Yeah,
figured out a
no,
way to do this.
fucking,
And for the record, fuck Discord.
yes, Discord can eat a bag of dicks from hell. So for this one, guys, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just do audio only. And
I'll edit it together in post, and you'll be fine.
yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do audio only for the recording right now, and we'll get all the post production and everything sorted later. But we are going to be commentating on the debate between presumptive VPs JD Vance and Tim Walz. At this point in time, anybody who's followed the first episode that we put out, and most certainly after the second episode, you'll understand you'll know damn well who we're voting for, or well, who I'm voting for. Our favorite Canadian can't vote because he's a bitch.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? It's entirely possible that in some swing state, my name will show up as having voted for Kamala Harris, but I will not have been the one to do it.
That is a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get on with this. We're starting as they're introducing the candidates.
2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaign.
I love how they felt the need to specify that they did not share the questions. I love how they felt the need to share.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you playing the audio?
Yes.
Because I cannot hear anything.
You're not going to be able to hear it.
From Maine to Texas are picketing.
Oh.
We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora.
You're going to have to play it on your end to hear the audio as well. I'm at minus 206, 35 basically.
President Biden has deployed more than
Minus
40,000 U.S. military
206.35.
personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war.
1
Iran
moment.
is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced.
Alright, I have it
the
set
time
there
it
as
would
well,
take to
so I
develop a
guess we
nuclear
shall
weapon.
both
It is
start
down now
in
to
5, 4.
Oh, I've continued
3.
going. I've continued going.
Oh.
So
Alright, this is going to be a bit difficult if I can't hear.
206.39. 206.39.
6:39.
All right. 3, 2, 1, play.
Or 2 weeks' time.
Alright.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners.
Well, that's a lie. As we've
Israel
established, the Israelis put into place the Hannibal Doctrine, and they utilized the Hannibal Doctrine. So a good chunk of those civilian casualties were actually caused by the Israelis.
Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership.
Did he just say Israel and its proxies?
Along with our Israeli
Yes,
partners,
yes, he did.
stop the
Well, he's not wrong.
But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world.
Well, remember, the
saw
Brits love their proxies,
nearly $80
and
billion
Israel
Trump
is their
talking
strongest.
about crowd sizes is not what we need
Yeah.
in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were
Well-
closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John.
Not
Kelly,
even answering the
said that
question.
he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met.
Did he just
filibuster.
reference John Bolton as a credible source? Like, come on, man.
No, he said John Kelly, I think it was.
Oh, Kelly.
Not
Sorry.
John Bolton.
Sorry.
Yeah, he was.
I heard John, and my mind
Kelly.
immediately went to Bolton.
What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness.
You mean the steady leadership of running away?
Together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed.
What coalition? There's no such thing as a coalition. This isn't the 1990s anymore, bud.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance.
But hey, you wouldn't know anything about coalitions. You ran away as soon as you could.
A preemptive strike by Israel on Iran. You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give
that's a good start right there.
A little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are
connecting with people, actually establishing a connection with the people. That's a good start. That's a good start.
That if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos,
look at Walz's face.
In the world, and he did it by establishing effective
he is not comfortable right now.
Of stepping out of line.
Well, it was being reported that he was having a borderline anxiety attack before the debate.
And unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized.
Yeah, you want to talk about launching against allies? Talk about the fucking airbase that just got fucking annihilated. I'm sorry, I have no sympathy for the Israelis, and after watching those strikes, it's like, whew.
And I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was
revisionist history. Okay,
a coalition of nations.
That's not like literally the entirety of the fucking Biden administration.
To advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down...
Iran has been on the precipice of a nuclear weapon for the past 50 years.
Because that's the standard.
Tell us something new.
Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian
steady leadership like on the brink of World War III in multiple places.
Well, no, that's the whole point. That's the whole thing that they're trying to push right now is if they can get into a war, then they're more likely to win. That's why they want a war so fucking bad. That's why they're not getting the war, because the other side understands this administration will not actually work with them.
Yeah.
Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald
Yeah,
Trump
and look at his face.
consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to
That's
get to. Nora?
not untrue.
Thank you.
Like,
Let's turn now to Hurricane
like the worst you had was back and forth skirmishing that we're illegally in Syria, and that has been the biggest cause of that skirmishing.
Scientists say climate change makes
Yeah.
these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News...
Oh yeah, climate change. It just so happens that at the same time the universe is going through massive magnetic shifts that are causing everything to be more extreme.
Senator, what
Yep.
responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them.
See, that right there, Vance is holding Walz by the balls. He's tossing him bones while saying, "You're my little bitch." And I love that.
And
I love that.
all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris...
It's funny because I don't subscribe to the whole carbon emission thing whatsoever, but he's actually 100% on point there.
Look, first of all,
Yeah.
it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to solve. The governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen.
Yes, because magnetic forces are absolutely tearing through the entire universe, and the Earth is a speck compared to the rest of the universe.
What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in
The Inflation Reduction Act did nothing but actually fucking try to reshore shit, but they still haven't been able to get the Intel facility up and running in Phoenix because it's such a fucking shit show.
They've seen 500-year droughts, 5 major floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you.
You can't mitigate, you can only react. That's how this works.
President Trump has called climate change a hoax.
Yep.
Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the...
There's only one company here in the States that produces solar panels.
If you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production.
And for those who might be curious, the name of that company is SunPower. I was actually invested in them back in the day before they really blew up.
That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse
your
by the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look.
They're not refining the oil, though. That's the problem.
On that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that?
Yes, and most of these storms are affected by magnetism. And this is the problem, is that none of these people, I'll throw shade at both of them for this, none of them are talking about the magnetics involved. And that's a really big fucking problem, is that none of them want to acknowledge that the magnetic storms that we are currently going through are heavily affecting our weather patterns across the board. They're causing things to be even more extreme than what they normally would be. Hell, the magnetosphere is at about 30% capacity right now, meaning it's 70% weaker than what it normally should be, and carbon emissions aren't going to affect that, no matter how many people want to try to say.
We're going to turn now to immigration.
Correct. Well, I think the reason why they're not talking about that is because the answer to that is there's nothing we can do. It's just gonna fuck us, and that's that.
And that's the thing, is that they're just going for political points at this point in time. And it's like, no, like, you have no control over this. Nobody has any control over this. We have to just survive it.
Yes. And that is unpalatable to the masses, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started.
And it's not, and the bleed is not just the southern border, it is the northern border as well. The Canadian border is just as bad as the southern border. It's just not as heavily talked about. And Peter Satinello actually just recently did an episode on his channel where he was actually doing a ride-along where they were talking about this. And there was direct evidence in the area where he was at. Like, they were finding evidence of these migrants.
Into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations, and that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then
I love how much Walls is taking notes. Like, it just shows a lack of confidence in these talking points.
And I know I keep saying it, but look at his fucking facial expressions. It's night and day between them. He is absolutely fucking terrified.
You know what's funny? Honestly speaking, if Walls wasn't a bona fide fucking commie, like his little skank of a wife, like, I'm sorry, I have nothing good to say about his wife whatsoever, but if he wasn't a bona fide fucking communist, I think him and JD Vance could actually coordinate shit pretty fucking well. Funny enough.
Probably.
I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember, when she came into office, she said she was going to...
Because he gives me Blue Dog vibes, but I think his wife is the big reason why he's the way he is.
Governor,
He very much could be JD Vance's beta sidekick.
that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl.
Bullshit.
This is a crisis.
Bullshit. Kids and women are the number one routes for drugs coming across the border. That is not negotiable whatsoever. I'm sorry, but when you have women shoving packs of shit up their fucking vaginas and shit like that, like,
transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look,
and nobody is going to suspect a kid as a mule. Like, it's just something that happens. There's a reason why there's so many unattended minors, is because they get sent over, they get to a certain point, the cartels will pick shit up off of the kids and then leave the kids.
Crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs. DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things?
15,000
by the legislature.
border agents would not solve the fucking problem. Because even with the extra staffing, here's the fucking problem, is that the policies of the individual states are what are also at play.
Build you a big,
Like,
beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. So here we are again,
that's
9 years after he came down that escalator.
Okay, that right there was a fucking lie.
Telling him what he was going to do.
Mexico's the tariffs on Mexico are what we're paying for that wall. So, and in the case of the amount built, yeah, only 2% of the border wall got built. What they don't talk about is the amount of fortification of existing wall.
You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my
Correct.
point is that we already
That
have
was most of
international
the
separations thanks to
wall
Kamala Harris's
all
open
that Trump
border. I
built.
didn't accuse
Is
Kamala Harris
fixing
of
the
inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the
dilapidated
drug
parts of the
cartels
wall.
to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor,
Okay, so I have to give credit to the moderators is that they are hard stopping everybody. Like they're not taking any bullshit whatsoever.
We fix this issue.
I do have to give them credit there.
But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it.
We shall see if that continues.
If it continues, yes, 100%.
Surprises me on this. Talking about and saying I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergarten.
They should have instead sent the state law enforcement to escort cats.
But by standing with Donald Trump
and dogs.
Well, okay, so that's where the whole debate's going on, is that it was confirmed that it was Congolese that were eating the cats, and a bunch of people are back and forth on that shit. The point is that the stigma does hold true though, because there's a lot of people up in Queens that have been talking about this shit for years, and it's gone unanswered. Up in Queens, like there's stories about the human or the animal sacrifices and shit and whatnot, and so on and so forth.
Many of the changes that you would actually want to implement. You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim, and I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor,
holy shit. Dude, JD Vance has him by the balls, and Walz has no idea how to handle this because he's throwing him every fucking bone possible. He's literally extending the olive branch saying, dude, work with us. Like, this is what you get when you get a Republican/Democrat ticket like you do with Trump.
Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done.
This is also what happens when you get a high IQ, high functioning fucking Harvard grad versus some fucking stupid communist.
But Matthew 25:40 talks about to the least amongst us.
Oh my God, he's gonna do this. He's gonna try to pull this one.
Order to it. This bill does it. It's funded, it's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity.
But it's not it's not supported by the people whatsoever. HR 2, nobody supports it because of all the pork barrel bullshit that was laced into it. There's a reason why nobody was able to vote for it on a basis of, oh, it actually fucking makes a difference, because everybody was like, no, we don't want this because it has so much shit.
I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Wait,
so there's an application.
I think, wasn't HR 2 a different bill?
As an illegal migrant, apply for asylum.
I thought HR 2 is the border bill, right?
No. So the quote-unquote bipartisan border bill was not bullshit, was not HR 2. HR 2 was the bill that was the second bill passed by the Republicans after they took the House.
Okay,
basically HR 2 was the super right-wing border bill that was passed in the House, but then the Senate never took it.
Okay, so that was the good one. What was the other
Yeah,
one?
that was the good one.
The audience can't hear you because
I don't know the name of that one. That was the one that was started in the Senate. That's the bullshit one.
Okay, it was
they
the
keep
Senate
saying,
bill.
"Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that's the one that they keep saying, "Oh, Trump killed it." It was like, sure, but it was a bullshit bill.
So just
Right,
just like
HR2
here,
was the
just
good
like
one.
here in Ohio, where you had one bill out of the House, one bill out of the Senate. Everybody wanted the bill out of the House, but then the Senate bill passed because they or a reformed version of the Senate bill passed because it gave enough concessions to the House bill that they were willing to fucking vote for.
Thank you.
And that has to do with the constitutional carry stuff, which Ohio technically has constitutional carry, but it doesn't really have constitutional carry.
How's this going to impact me? The forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational.
Okay,
to where you're at.
yeah, okay.
And then making sure that the things you buy every
I'm
day
sorry,
are the
we already had this issue. It's called 2008.
The $35 insulin is a good thing.
Fucking being like, oh, we're gonna help people get into houses. It's like you tried this already and it collapsed the economy.
Yes. Why don't we just give mortgages to people who don't qualify for them?
Cash for
Surely
clunkers.
that won't go
Cash for
wrong.
clunkers was literally a replay of 2008. Like
Don't
they're
worry, Fannie
literally
Mae and Freddie Mac will be there to bail you out.
They're going back to the same toolbox every single fucking time.
Now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, "You're rich as hell, I'm gonna give you a tax cut." He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there?
Bullshit, because I felt the fucking tax cuts.
Increase in the national debt, the
I
largest.
2019, my tax rates were around 18%. Right now they're around 21, 22%. Like, come on.
It would increase inflation and potentially.
And you're not exactly in the quote-unquote 1% now, are you?
Oh, I'm as working class gets, bud.
The wealthiest to pay their fair share.
Yep.
When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
And here's the fun part about the whole the wealthy paying their fair share. Every time they have attempted to implement a plan like that, a record amount of offshoring occurs. Like, these people don't understand that these wealthy ass motherfuckers that have all this money will never actually pay a cent. They'll just move.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg has a compound in New Zealand that he literally sued and won against the fucking New Zealand government to build.
Vice president for 3.5 years.
Yep.
She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher.
Oh, by the way, RINs. I'm just gonna keep saying it, RINs. There's a reason why the cost of food is so fucking high. It's called RINs. It's called the EPA. Get rid of it.
Yep.
Not when asking for promotion, but
For those who don't know, the Renewable Identification Number system, it sets a artificial floor under the price of gasoline because of ethanol. Ethanol is a poison that needs to be removed from the economy. Oh, and if you happen to be a farmer that grows ethanol corn, I fucking hate you, and I think you're a despicable human being. Grow something more productive.
Well, actually, no. Even better. Just put it in the fucking bourbon, not the gasoline.
No, here's the fun part about that. Honestly speaking, I'd rather these motherfuckers grow soybeans to sell to the Chinese than fucking grow corn for ethanol.
Now, Tim admirably admits that
Because at least then the soybeans are being fucking they're actually used for something rather than fucking over the entire U.S.
As I said, it's ethanol, right? It's corn. Just make more bourbon, right? What is bourbon? Ethanol from corn, right? Not in gas. Put it in bourbon.
In a generation in this country.
Well, then talk to the ATF about stills.
And we're gonna get back to that common sense wisdom so that you
Don't get me started on the ATF and the fucking bullshit distilling laws.
You're worried about paying the bills. It's gonna stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before.
Oh yes,
Oh,
because
yes,
all
COVID.
those all those Democrat governors closing, locking down their states is somehow the fault of Trump.
Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this.
Because the experts were all right. Because all the experts are currently getting sued into oblivion. Anthony Fauci is probably going to jail for at least a year or two for his actions. Like, yeah, totally. The experts.
Listen to the people at
Yes.
the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years? In the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all
Yeah. And your donors would never allow you to change it.
Experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that
Akron, Ohio, everyone.
Self-reliant.
Bridgestone and Firestone offshored completely. Bridgestone offshored 75% of their production. The only companies that are still in Akron, Ohio are Continental General and Goodyear. And Goodyear has 50% of their production offshored.
We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue.
And I'm pretty sure Continental and General have 25% of their shit offshore. So
Vance killed it with that answer.
Akron,
Ohio is one of the greatest examples.
To stop, and we're not going to stop.
And no, Detroit doesn't count because Detroit was killed by other things.
Wisdom, which is what Donald Trump
Mostly the auto industry unions.
Well, yeah, that's a whole fucking subject.
If you're listening tonight and you
Yeah.
want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things over.
Oh yeah. I'm a union guy. Literally the same unions that are responsible for fucking over people for the past 40 years.
Most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy
unions that voted in favor of all this bullshit.
in American history with China.
Yep.
So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it.
Okay, this
The
is
unions that
Walls attempting to take his balls back from the jar.
Bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are
That's
venture
smart.
capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross
that he
generalization.
did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did.
And JD Vance just put those balls right back in the jar. Holy shit.
Yep.
Groceries and
Oh, holy shit.
Fucking death blow. Fucking death blow.
Oh my god. Like I feel Tim Walz's pain right now. Oh my god.
Not be able to afford the things that you need to afford.
And you can see it in his face again.
We can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
Absolute fucking soy jack response.
Senator, Governor.
Fucking reply guy response.
Oh,
I hope we talk about
very nice. Okay, yeah, no, I'm giving credit to these moderators. They are not fucking around whatsoever. They are trying to retain numbers. They are trying desperately to retain numbers. So I will give them credit.
Your leadership qualities, Governor Walz. You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square
Oh,
protests
no.
of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? You have 2 minutes.
well, to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural.
He's doing the meme.
Town of 400.
Here's a question. The answer, I grew up in a middle-class home.
Oh my god.
He's doing the meme. He's doing the meme.
Oh my god.
Use the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Filibustering.
Filibustering so hard.
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those
self-flagellation.
in Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people.
Because he got caught in a fucking lie.
I will say more than anything.
Yep.
Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about
Losing?
trying to
Excuse me?
the world.
China reeled so hard from it that they had to get in bed with the Russians for energy supplies because of how bad that fucking trade war went for them. What do you mean?
Being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that,
Oh,
the
no.
question was, can you explain the
No, just
discrepancy?
all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on
It
this.
wasn't
So I
misspoke,
will
it
just-
was a lie.
That's what
It
I've
was a
said.
lie. Oh my god.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
Jesus.
Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office.
This is a
and you said he
bloodbath.
Could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times.
This is a bloodbath on the same level as the Trump
real
Biden
quick,
debate
real
was a
quick.
bloodbath.
In regards to this, real quick, before he starts answering, J.D. Vance has gone from a borderline neocon,
Writing to someone in 2020,
which
quote,
is why my dad refused to vote for him back in 2016.
You're now his running mate,
Or
and you've shifted
2015,
many of your
2014,
policy stances
whatever
to
fucking
align
year
with
he got
his.
first elected.
If you become
My
vice
dad
president,
refused to vote for
why should
him,
Americans trust that you will give Donald
and he
Trump
has
the
shifted
advice
position.
needs
He has realized
and
he
not
was
the
at
advice he
in a
wants?
bad position because he realized,
First of all, Mark,
oh,
as I
being a
said,
neocon is a
sometimes,
problem.
Of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also
Yes.
been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border.
I just want to state on the rising wages. I went from making minimum wage to making $12 an hour, and I was bringing home so much money in 2019 that I actually had no idea what the fuck to do with myself for a bit. And then going into 2020, I had a very similar situation. So, and that was in regardless of COVID, with the amount of money that I wasn't spending at the time. I had by the end of the year on a 13.50 an hour. Seriously.
Did the video go down for you too?
Yep. These bastards. Hold on. Let's
Yeah.
pause for a second. Let's see if we can find it again real quick.
Yeah, well, the issue is, I believe, with these videos is that, like, the live stream ends, and then afterwards you have to get a different link for the actual, the recorded version of the live stream. You have to get a different version of. I'll
Yeah,
send you a
hold
link.
on.
Give me a moment.
I'm looking for it right now.
Oh, all right, I found it. Oh wait, no, it's still down.
I got it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Can you send me a link as well?
Yep, I'm sending
Thanks.
it to you now.
All right, just tell me the time. Tell me once you found the timestamp you want to be at, and I'll send it.
Yeah. Let me just restart the recording, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
In 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler.
This is a shit
I know
show,
you've said, you've
but I
been asked
love
many
it.
times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post
And now
reported
the
new
mask
messages
comes
last
off
week in
of
which
these
you
fucking
also
moderators.
disparaged Trump's
Well,
economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate.
You
and
called
shifted
him
many
Hitler.
of your policy stances to
Okay.
align
Well,
with
no,
his.
she's
If
bringing
you
up a
become
valid
vice
point from it,
president,
and as I said,
why
my
should
dad
Americans
refused to
trust
vote
that you will
for
give
him
Donald Trump
based
the advice
on
he
his
needs to
bullshit.
hear?
And
And
back
not
then,
just the
he
advice
he
he
was
wants
definitely a
to hear.
neocon.
You have 2
Now
minutes.
he is
Well,
not.
first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open, and sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record, but most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris
Again, look at fucking Walls' face.
Because he can't fight against this. They kept those tariffs in place because they knew damn well that they couldn't survive. Like, a lot of people don't realize this. The federal deficit would be 2 or 3 trillion higher if it was not for these tariffs.
Nora?
Thank you.
Yep.
Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was
Abortion is a
overturned, you
non-issue at
signed
this
a
point in
bill
time. It's
into law
ranking so
to make
like
Minnesota one
out of the
the
top
least
20, it's ranking
restrictive
past the
states
top
in the nation when it comes
below the
to
top 10.
abortion.
Like, people
Former
do not give a
President
fuck
Trump
about
said
abortion
in
right
the
now.
last debate
Like,
that
nobody
you
does.
believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump.
It's not on
put this
anybody's
all in
mind.
motion.
The only people
He
that care about are
brags about
screeching
how
fucking
great it
feminists,
was that
and
he put
they
the
make
judges
up
in
a
and overturned
minority
Roe
within a
versus Wade,
minority.
52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home,
No, it wouldn't.
got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right. in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry.
Oh my God, dude, the whole
It's
Project
going to get more
2025
difficult,
thing.
if not impossible, to get
They keep
contraception
latching
and
onto
limit
this,
access,
and
if
yet
not
it's like,
eliminate
dude, like
access to infertility
everybody,
treatments. For so many
everybody
out there listening,
who's
we
actually
include
read the thing, I've
infertility
actually read
treatments
it.
or why have a child.
It's like,
That's
oh
somebody
yeah, I
else's
agree with this,
business,
but I disagree
but
with
those
these
things are
5
being
things.
proposed.
Like
And
it
the
was
catch-all
it was
on this
neocon
is,
fucking
well,
central in the
states will
bitch.
decide
Like no,
what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone
Honestly
can't
speaking,
support
that's not
legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world.
It's funny
My question
because
is, why have you
15-week
changed your
bans
position?
are so common across the
First
world,
of
it's
all, I
unfucking
never
real.
supported a national ban.
Yep.
I did during when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum.
I believe in
standard.
most
For
of
example,
Europe, it's
we have a
actually like
partial
fucking
birth
12-week
ban
bans.
in place
Well,
in
yeah,
this country at the
not
federal
even
level.
15.
I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
anybody's
no,
trying
it's
to get rid of that, or at least I hope
it's
not.
so common
But I know
across the
Democrats
board
have taken a very
to
radical
ban
pro-abortion
anything
stance.
outside of the
But
first
Nora,
trimester.
you know,
It's
one of the
unfucking
things
real.
that changed
Yeah.
is in the state of
You know,
Ohio,
there
we
are
had
actually
referendums
only
in
2
2023,
countries in the
and the people
world
of Ohio
where
voted
it's
overwhelmingly, by the way,
abortion is
against
legal
my
up till birth.
position. And I think
Which
what I
two
learned from
countries do you think
Nora is
that
we've
that
gotta
is
do
that
a
would
better
be?
job at winning
Please
people's
enlighten
trust.
me.
So many young women would love to have
North
families.
Korea
So many young women also
and
see
Canada.
unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy
Well,
their
Canada
livelihood,
makes sense.
destroy
North
their
Korea.
education, destroy their
Well, okay,
relationships.
North
Yes.
Korea
We have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are
2023
committed to
or
pursuing
2024,
pro-family policies,
that made
making
sense.
childcare more
Now,
accessible, making
if North Korea
fertility
still
treatments
has
more
that in
accessible,
effect,
'cause we've
that's a
gotta do
problem.
a better job at that, and that's
They
why
need
we
to
need
do.
not
leadership
have
that-
that.
And
effect.
so does Canada.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care.
Women are
physicians
having
feeling
mass
like they may
miscarriages
be
across the board
prosecuted for
anyways. That's the
providing
point
that
of
care.
MAHA.
And as far as making
That's the
sure that
point,
we're educating
is
our
that
children
you're
and giving them
having
options. Minnesota's the
record
state
number
with
of
the lowest teen
miscarriages even
pregnancy
under
rates.
Roe v. Wade.
We understand
Because
that
it's
too.
a
We know
case
that the
of
options need to be
nobody,
available, and
like
we make that
nobody's
true.
fucking
We also
healthy.
make it, we're a top 3
My
state
my
for the
ex
best place to raise
had
children.
7
But these two
miscarriages
things to try and
before
say
she had her
that
daughter.
We're
Damn.
pro-children, but we don't like
7.
this, or you guys are
Like,
pro-abortion. That's not the case at all.
I'm sorry, but
We are
the evidence
pro-freedom for
across the
women to make their
board
choices,
is that
and we're
miscarriages
going,
are
and Kamala Harris is
record
making the
numbers
case
across the
to
board
make
because we're as
options for
unhealthy of a
children more
society as we
affordable.
are.
$6,000 child tax credit,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the
pro-abortion,
law is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort
It's
the way
it's
a law
fun
is
because
written to
being
try and
being
make
from
point, that's not
Ohio,
it
we
at all.
have
What was
one
that
of the
law, Mr.
greatest
Governor?
fucking
Please tell me,
like
what was that wrong about? That is not the way the law
the
is written. Look,
greatest
I've
examples of
given- but how?
just
I've given
the
this advice
depravity
on
of
a
these
lot
people
things that getting involved
simply from the
in because it's
perspective
been
of
misread and it was
you had an
fact-checked the last debate. But the point on
like
this
a
is
fucking
there's a continuation of these
13-year-old,
guys to try
like
and tell
8
women or
weeks,
to get
9
involved.
weeks pregnant
I
or
used
something like
this line
that.
on this, just mind
And
your
they
own
were
business
talking about
on
how
this.
they were
Things
traveling to
worked best
fucking
when Roe versus Wade was in place.
traveling to
When
fucking
we do a
or
restoration
Illinois or
of
some
Roe,
shit or
that worked
Indiana
best.
or
That
some
doesn't
shit like that
preclude us
because of the
from
6-week ban,
increasing
and then it
funding
turned
for
out that the
children.
fucking
It doesn't increase us from
mom's
making sure that
boyfriend
once that
was
child's born, like
sexually
in Minnesota, they get meals.
sexually
They get early
assaulting
childhood
the child.
education. They get
And they were
healthcare.
trying to
So
protect
the
the boyfriend.
behind, we're gonna do all these
And
other
then the
things,
boyfriend
when
ends
you're
up getting
not proposing
arrested
it in
for
your budget.
raping the girl.
Kamala Harris is proposing
So
it.
it's
She's
like, no,
proposing all those
I'm
things to
sorry,
make
you
life easier
guys,
for families.
you guys don't have any
That's a
legs to
specific
stand
question,
on.
Governor. You gave me a
at all.
slogan as a
It's
response.
not
No,
the
they do
case.
not.
It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
All right, real quick, let me find the spot to skip forward to.
All right. While you find that, I will be right back. I am going to take a brief bathroom break, and I shall
Yep,
see
go
you
ahead.
shortly.
Hold on, restarting the recording.
All right.
All right.
So it is now. I can see the long shot between the moderators on the left and
All
the
right.
candidates on the right. Are you there as well?
Yep. 3, 2,
All right, then.
1, start.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause
Oh,
of
God,
deaths
that
of
wasn't
children
just-
and teens in America
just
is by
lathered
firearms.
with
Senator
bias.
Vance, you oppose most gun
course.
legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to
all
ban
this shit's been
certain
tested and none of it
semi-automatic
works?
rifles, including AR-15s.
Yep.
So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But
All them switches at the ports.
What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but
It's
our
a
first
FUD.
responsibilities to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want
Yes,
to
and
solve
those same
this,
red flag
we've got
laws have gotten
folks
so
that
many
won't
people that
allow
shouldn't have been
research
killed.
to be
It's
even done
unfucking
on
real.
gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and I here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference.
So maybe
It's
maybe
not
cracking
infringing
down
on
on
our
the
Second
actual
Amendment. And the idea
cause
to
of
have
most of this
some
shit,
these
you know,
weapons out there,
the
it just
people
doesn't make any
the
sense.
people who
Kamala
actually
Harris,
commit the
as an
crimes
attorney
rather
general,
than, you know,
worked on
trying
this
to
issue.
target
She
everybody.
knows that it's
Yeah.
there. No one's trying to scare
I'm
mothers
gonna
and say,
just
"We're taking your
go
gun,"
out
but I
there and
ask all
say,
of
I
you
don't
out
know,
there,
maybe
do you want your schools
maybe
harder to
reduce
look
the
like a
supply
fort?
of SSRIs.
Is that what we have to go when we know there's
Maybe
countries
that'd
around
fix
the
it.
world
Yeah, no, well,
that
that's
their
part of
children
it,
aren't
but
practicing
also,
these
you
types
know,
of drills.
like, oh, hey,
They're
this
being
kid
kids.
is
We
act,
owe it to
you know,
them
we've
to
been
get a
we've
fix.
been
These are things that
researching
shouldn't
and
be
we've
that
this
difficult.
kid's been
You
on
can
our
still
watch
keep your
lists and shit like that.
firearms,
It's
and we
like,
can make a difference. We
and
have
you
to. If you're
didn't
listening tonight,
actually
this
fucking
breaks
try
your
to
heart.
assist. You
Senator.
didn't try to
Tim,
actually
first of all,
do
I know
anything.
that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you saying
okay.
so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA.
I've become friends with school shooters.
Yes. That may be the greatest and worst line ever uttered in a presidential debate.
No, that right there is the
Bravo.
biggest fuck up possible. Oh my god.
The most
Yes.
firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to
I
inflation.
love this
of housing
because
and
at the
rent.
end of the day, you
There's
come
a
to
shortage of
Ohio
more than 4 million homes in the United
and
States,
you have
and
so
that
many motherfuckers that
contributes
carry
to the high
guns
housing prices.
that you don't
Governor
have
Walz,
these
the
large-scale
Harris campaign
problems
promises a
outside of these
$25,000
specific
down payment
areas.
assistance for
Like,
first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
You only
and
hear
a
about these shootings in
$10,000
Cleveland,
tax
Columbus,
credit.
Cincinnati,
They also
Dayton,
promise
Toledo,
to
etc.,
build
etc. You
3
only
million
hear about them in
new
these
homes.
big areas.
Where are you building these homes?
And
don't
that just
handing out
drives the
kind of
point
money
home
just
further
drive up
that
prices higher.
federally
No,
you
it's
can't
not.
fix
You know, we
this.
have-
It is a
first, let me
case
say
of
this
an
issue of
armed
housing,
society is
and
a
I think
polite
those of you
society
listening on
because
this,
you
the
don't know
problem we've had
who the
is
motherfucker is
that
in the
we've got a
room
lot of folks
that can
see housing as
bushwhack
another
your shit
commodity.
real fucking
It
quick.
can be bought up, it can be shifted,
Yeah.
it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes.
So you can do this at the local level, but you can't do other things at the local level? Is that what you're saying, Tim?
Bill was one thing, but a
Yep.
veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it.
I don't have to make a down payment on
a
a house loan either.
The appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it, and I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it.
Yeah, because of all the red tape and everything that exists
Governor,
that
your time is
are
up.
keeping
Senator Vance,
keeping a
as
shit
far
ton of
as your
builders from
campaign's
actually
position, the
building,
promise is
but
to
also,
seize
you know,
federal
you
lands
have
to build
a bunch of
homes,
big
remove
builders that are
regulation,
building
provide
shitty
tax
housing.
breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief. You have 2 minutes.
There's no such thing as immediate relief. There's a reason why we track housing. There's a reason why we track housing built on the decade, because there's no immediate effect.
Which does drive up costs.
Yeah.
25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers.
Oh, Tim,
in the country. It's why we have
the blacks of Chicago are calling. They want to know where their affordable housing is.
Increases in illegal alien population.
They're calling on their Obama phones too.
Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill baby drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build a house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance,
He's not wrong there.
23 seconds.
Again, RINs. Dear God, somebody bring up RINs.
We will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places.
Yes,
where
the
we
fucking federal, quote unquote, federally protected land is a huge fucking problem in this regard.
We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be
For
here.
those
Senator, your time is
not in the know,
Governor, I do want to let you respond to the
Black Lives
allegation that
Matter
the vice
is not the
president
worst
letting
BLM.
in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants.
true. And again,
Fucking
you have
Bureau
the
of
facts. I
Land
guess we agreed not
Management
to fact
is.
check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail.
Anybody remember that comment I made, or that little spiel I made earlier about copper mines in Alaska?
To build homes who aren't able to build homes.
That's a federal land problem.
We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations?
Every time Vance says
I'm sorry.
Wall's name in an answer,
that in some cases,
Walls
many
looks
places
at him
local,
like a
many of
fucking
them are state. I
dog
don't know
that
which ones are
is
federal, but I think when
has
it's
just
on
had its name
regulations,
mentioned by its owner.
people think they can get rid of them.
Yeah,
I
no.
think you want to
Again,
be able to
Walls
get out of
has
your
his
house
ball
in a fire.
has
I
his
think you
balls in
wanna
a
make
jar,
sure
and
that
they're
there's
on
fire
JD
proof and
Vance's
those types of
fucking
things. So
shelf.
which are the regulations? Because the vice
Yes.
president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concept.
Yeah, when you're
of
not
employment law.
taxing people
It's
for not
fairly
having
simple
health
common sense.
insurance,
I
it
think
kind of
Tim Walz
helps.
knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice, and will also.
I would like to point out there is there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies that once you tell a pharmacist that you have insurance, they are not allowed to, under NDA, they are not allowed to disclose cheaper alternatives. This is why whenever I need to go to the pharmacy, I will straight up ask them, what generics of this do you have available? Because generally speaking, you'll be able to get the same medication for cheaper.
It's an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President
Because your
Trump
copay
has ever said
might be
or ever
$10,
done.
but then the cost of your insurance might be like $50 or something like that, and you're able to get it for $20, which means you're paying lower premiums.
He worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M,
Mayo Clinic. You mean the same Mayo Clinic that got boofed by Cleveland Clinic as the #1 fucking cancer research hospital in the fucking not only cancer research but cancer treatment.
Go back and remember.
Mayo Clinic hasn't been on the fucking map for years, so using it as a reference is pretty fucking terrible.
Obamacare. On day one, he tried to
Ohio's got Cleveland Clinic. Get boofed, bitch.
He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill.
Oh, John McCain. Oh, such a stellar individual, such a good human.
If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably
He
not.
is looking up at us right now and smiling. Well, maybe not smiling, but
Negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue. And when Donald Trump
The fact that neither of them are bringing up patent issues really pisses me off because patents are where most drug costs come from.
But what Senator
Because oh, by the way, Canada has a bunch of really cheap shit. Why is that? Because the patent laws are actually better up there than they are here.
What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved.
I refuse to do anything with the exchanges. I only shop on my own.
What these guys do is they
because I don't want to deal with the bullshit of the exchanges.
President, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low, take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people,
another
that's
non-answer.
the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
so
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it,
I would much rather
when we
have to
incentivize
pay
people
for the
be in
costs
market,
of everything
when we help people
and
who
actually
might not
have
be
the
able to
money to
afford
do
get
so
there,
rather
and we
than
make
fucking
sure
be
then when
paying
you get sick and
exuberant
old,
fucking
it's there for
insurance
you. Because I heard
costs
people say,
that
well,
don't actually
I don't
cover
wanna
things.
buy into Medicare or whatever.
My
Good luck
my
buying
my
healthcare
dentist
once
would
you're
like to
70.
speak to
So look,
United
the
Healthcare
ACA
for that
works.
reason.
We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris
No,
did
on
that.
a
She
serious
made
note,
everything
like
better.
my dentist
She's
is pissed
negotiating those
at
two
United
drugs on
Healthcare right
Medicare
now
for the first time in
because
American history.
Thank you.
they
Margaret,
3 hours,
I
nearly
apologize. We're
3
out of time.
hours
Another
of talking
subject
to
to
United
discuss.
Healthcare.
Margaret,
They
let's talk
told
about
me
families
this is
in
the plan you
America.
need in order to cover this stuff.
There
I
is a
got the
child
plan,
care
and then they
crisis
only
in this country,
they only
and the
covered
United States
about
is one of the very
$100
few
of
developed
about
countries in the
5,000.
world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take care of our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state.
Yes, we will mandate that you must pay money because, you know, you might have the money. You might have the money, business owner.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how
this is just like with the school choice stuff.
Because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to
Not
challenge
unconstitutional
this
and not
year's election results, even
illegal
if
in any way, shape, or form?
governor certifies the results?
Nope.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration.
That was a good move. That was a good move.
Democracy in this country.
By saying Harris Biden, it shifts all the blame on her, basically.
It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle.
Using the unity ticket to his advantage right there.
We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he did. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, "We're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties." The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long
None
enough
of
to
it
know
was
when I said as a
adjudicated.
football coach, sometimes you really want to win.
Yep.
But the democracy is bigger than winning an election.
99% of the
You shake
cases
hands,
were tossed
and then you
out
try and
on
do everything
lack
you
of
can to help
standing.
The other side win.
Which
Exactly.
lack of standing is a catch-all, just like disorderly conduct.
The idea that
Yeah, it basically meant, well, before anything
already
happened,
laying the groundwork
they
for
didn't
people
have
not accepting
standing
this.
because
And a president's
no
words
one was
matter.
harmed. And
A president's
after it
words
happened, they
matter.
didn't have
People
standing
hear
because
that.
the harm was
So
already done.
I think
Which
this
is
issue of settling our
Kind of
differences at the
absurd, but
ballot box,
that's what they did.
shaking hands
That's
when
what
we lose,
they said.
being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power.
What?
And here we are.
The
4
first-
years later
okay,
in the
no,
same boat.
that wasn't
I will
ex-
tell you this.
Oh, my Lord.
When this is over, we need to shake hands
Allegedly
this
fair election.
and the winner needs to be
Oh,
the winner.
Lordy
This has
Lord.
got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand.
Oh, revisionist history. Okay, okay. Put down your revised version of fucking 1880 or 1984.
Massive repercussions.
The Ministry of Truth wants its copy
Censorship to
back.
stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something. That's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. This is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have
not
the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office even if the president doesn't. And I think Kamala Harris would agree she wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
All right, real quick. So the last bit, the time is 9:42 PT on my screen. Or 7:42 PT. My bad. 7:42 PT.
No worries.
My brain's broke. I'm tired. I want to go to bed here soon.
Same here. Same here. All right, I'll just sync up. All right, I have paused it just at the two debate moderators.
I've got it at
7:42. 7:42, just as the cut came in, like just as it faded in from black to them.
All right, hold on. All right, I'm pretty much where you're at. All right, ready?
Yep. So give me a countdown, and I'll pause when you're ready.
3, 2,
I'll
1,
unpause. Yeah.
go.
All right.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks.
Oh my God, Taylor Swift.
And they
Taylor
all
Swift.
agree on
Oh my
everything,
fucking God.
But they are
And
truly
and
optimistic.
fucking Dick
They
Cheney.
believe
Yeah,
in a
Dick
positive
Cheney.
future of this
Fucking
country,
Dick
and one
Cheney.
where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing.
Yep, he
real
said the
solutions for
word.
middle
He
class,
said
and
joy.
she's centering
Yep,
you
he
at
said
the
it.
heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
All right, so in regards to the closing statements, I'm just going to say it right now. I think they both came off pretty fucking weak. I think they were both pretty weak on that.
Yeah.
You know,
It was standard boilerplate nonsense.
Well, Walz decided to go the freedom route. Vance decided to hammer down the economy side of things. It was very boilerplate. Very, very boilerplate. Yeah. Which, okay, fine, whatever. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. I don't believe that that's a terrible way to close it out, but I don't think it's the greatest way they could have closed it out. But it is what it is.
Both the closing statements were very ineffective.
Now
they were very inoffensive and very ineffective.
Yeah. Now, in regards to the overall debates,
Vance just murdered him.
Yeah, let's go half by half, I guess. In the first half, Tim Walz's balls were firmly on the shelf, like firmly on the shelf.
You could see. As I know, I keep going, but like first hour, just look at his fucking facial features, his fucking facial expression for the first hour. It's just like, have you ever? All right, he was fucking Courage the Cowardly Dog, but without the courage. He's fucking terrified, fucking nervous wreck, fucking anxiety-ridden, fucking millennial level of terror for the first hour.
Now, in the second half, I do have to give some credit to Walz. He was fighting for his balls back. Him and JD had the jar in hand, and they were tugging war in that shit real fucking hard. So second half, Walz definitely came back a little stronger. And overall decent debate. Again, the closing statements incredibly boilerplate. I'm gonna go with your terminology for that. Very boilerplate. Mm-hmm. But overall, in my opinion, much better than the presidential. Like the presidential debate was just a shit show. This at least had a monicum of fucking sense to it and a monicum of fucking actual like debate across the board.
But that being said, if I could vote, but I can't because I'm not American, I would be voting for the one who's not friends with the school shooter.
Dude, when he said that, my ears perked. I perked up so hard to that. I'm like, wait, did he just say that?
Yes.
And to really actually cover the whole gun epidemic thing real quick, because that's is something that's a little near and dear to my fucking heart. I live in Ohio. Like, I am a Ohio-born, Ohio-raised, Ohio fucking corn-fed kid who has seen every fucking facet of life. I have seen the rich. I have seen the poor. I have seen every fucking crackhead in between. And across the board, you do not have those problems. Like, the problems that they are talking about are not those. You don't get those problems here in Ohio. You know, you look at let's go back to when I was a kid. The Chardon shooting, for example. That was a big one because it was very local, Northeast Ohio. Chardon, Ohio, it's here in the Northeast area. And you actually look at that, and it was a targeted, it was a hit. It was, the dude was going after his ex-girlfriend, and he was going after the new boyfriend. He shoots them, hauls ass. That was a malicious targeting. That was, again, he was going after them specifically. And then you look at this other shit that keeps going on. It's tantamount to gang violence. It's tantamount to gang activity. You know, the number of stabbings that we're seeing in schools because a fight breaks out between two rival groups of people, and one of them decides to pull out a fucking steak knife or some shit like that.
Yeah.
You know, the number of people that are consistently going out and about thinking that they're untouchable, and then they get fucking boofed because some fucking rival group decides to fucking get their ass while they're walking through the hall at school. Like, that kind of shit is much more prevalent in those areas, and that's the shit that they're fucking talking about. Now, in the case of the rural suicides, okay, I'm sorry. Suicide rates in rural areas correlate with suicide rates in urban areas almost across the board. And that's because you have so many fucking problems for both the urban population and the rural population, to the point where the rural population, like, for example, suicide rates are absolutely ridiculous in places like West Virginia because, oh, wait, you've destroyed the industries that these people rely on to live, and they can't move out of those areas because they are going to be alien to any area that they fucking move into. They're not going to be capable of assimilating into a population that they have no connection with whatsoever. The same thing can be said about...
And also that they don't have the money to do so, even if they could.
Well, yes and no, because at the end of the day, let's be frank. Let's be frank. I do hate the fact that people talk about moving being as expensive as it is. If you are desperate enough, you will figure it the fuck out. You will. Period. End of story. But the fact of the matter is that so many people have they've gotten stuck into this mindset that everything has to cost an arm and a leg. Like, for example, the whole childcare thing. The childcare thing annoys me quite a bit because I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. If you're going with what I refer to as the Gerber lifestyle, where you're buying you're buying life insurance, you're buying all the name brand foods, you're buying this, you're buying that, you're buying all the Gerber lifestyle. If you're engaging in that, then yes, it's going to be fucking expensive because these companies, it's the same thing with pet insurance. If you're stupid enough to actually fucking get insurance on your fucking pet, you're going to be paying through the fucking nose. Like, if I remember correctly, the insurance costs for a moderately sized dog, and we're talking like 50 to 100 pounds, let's say that, is like $100-$200 a month in some cases, depending on what companies you go with. And if
that's absurd.
And if you're willing to shell out the money, then go the fuck ahead. Do what you're gonna do.
Who insures their pets?
People who think that they need something, but in reality, it's like, yeah, it's gonna suck paying $2,000 in vet bills 1 month. It's gonna suck. You're probably gonna have to put it on a credit card, and you're probably gonna have to pay a little interest on that bitch. It's gonna possibly fucking happen. But at the end of the fucking day, if you're sitting there and you're bringing home an extra $500 a fucking month because you're actually able to fucking get a better job, because you're not competing with a bunch of people for fucking positions. Like let's put it this way. If I'm able to get even a monicum of a raise at this point in time, it's a huge fucking boon for me. Because it's like, oh, hey, I can actually make some headway. Whereas 99% of the time, most people don't have that fucking capability because they're competing with people in a large area. You know, my new job, for example, you know, the same job that I just had my first day of for today, that job is highly competed for because of all the benefits that the company provides. And when you are in the position where you're sitting there and you've got all this stuff that you're competing for, you might lose out on it. And a lot of people don't realize that at the end of the day, what matters most is how much you're able to bring home. And if you're paying out 20% of your fucking wages in taxes every year, which it's not just 20%, because remember, FICA is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a case of, like, you're sitting there and you're losing 30% of the fucking labor that you provide a year, all total. And it's like, what could you do with that money? If all of a sudden say income tax was 10%, and I could outright remove myself from the FICA system because I don't want to be a part of it, I don't want Social Security, I don't want Medicaid, all of a sudden I'm sitting...
It's not going to exist for you. Like,
well, even beyond that...
Anyone of your age, you think you're going to get those things?
Well,
no.
even beyond that. I'm talking just on the principle of choice. You know, Tim Walls wants to talk about choice. If I was given the choice of being able to remove myself from that system, and then my income taxes were like 10%, I would be in such a vastly different position than what I am right now. But, you know, instead, every month I have like $200, $300 that are stolen from me in Medicaid and fucking Social Security taxes. On top of the money that the company itself is putting into that. Which it's like, oh wait, if my company wasn't putting that money in, I might actually be able to get paid more. And it's the structural breakdown that you have to really think about. And let's face it, you know, Medicaid and Social Security and all that shit isn't going to exist for me, not because it's stretched to the 9 fucking gills and it's fucking collapsing under its own weight, because the world is fucking going to decide, or let me rephrase, the universe has decided, no, you're in the 6,000 year fucking solar cycle, bud. It doesn't fucking matter. That shit ain't gonna exist for me simply because the universe has ordained it so. And that's what really annoys me about the political fucking debates, is that they don't want to talk about this shit because they don't want to incite a panic. But it's like, yo, look, if you explain it and explain it like this, hey, there's this shit going on that removes, like, the climate change crowd, they've got it wrong. It's not carbon emissions, it's fucking magnetism. And we have no control over it. We literally have no way to influence this in any way, shape, or form. Thus, there's no way for us to actually pay or buy our way out of this. So all that NGO money that the government is sending out is worthless. It's literally nothing. What should happen is people should be told, hey, you should be living on these parts of the world, and we should be building up the industry to be able to survive what the fuck is coming.
Yes.
And that's the thing.
I I mean, again, if you say that, like, if you are to tell a population that, like, hey, 10% of you are going to be able to survive this thing, you're
It'll be
going to lose every election ever.
It's
Well,
yeah, sure.
There are no incentives.
Yeah.
There are no incentives for any
But that's
politician
also
to say that, despite it being true. Which, in a way, if you are aware of this, that's a very good thing, because you can very much ensure not only that you're prepared for, but that you're in a very,
Oh yeah, no.
will,
Here's the
how
thing.
do I put this? That you will have your choice of all the fucking women once the thing happens.
Let me
Because
put it to this way for the
They're all
masses.
fucked. Yeah.
Let me put it to this way: if you live between Tennessee and the Great Lakes, and you just live in that band, you're almost guaranteed to survive. You know, all these maps, I love all these maps that they post, because there's like 20 different ones that they'll post of what the world will look like if the sea levels rise. First off, the math has been done. The sea levels, if all the ice in the world was to melt in its current form, it would amount to about 2 inches or so in sea levels rising all total. It's minuscule. It would take the moon moving or farther. Correct me if I'm wrong. High tide is when the moon moves closer. Low tide is when the moon moves farther, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it would require the moon moving basically to the point of where it's going to crash into the Earth in order to obtain the sea levels that they're talking about. And even then, the moon's moving away from us because our magnetic pole has actually shifted and degraded to the point where the gravitational forces, the magnetic forces that actually allow the moon to retain its orbit, have weakened to the point where the moon is moving away from us. Mm-hmm. Now, will it just float off into space and disappear? No, it will. It will eventually reset its orbit. But the fact of the matter is that the sea level changes that they keep spouting about can't physically happen. Again, it would borderline have to have the moon crashing into the Earth, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you think the sea levels are the problem at that point in time. No, the fact that the moon isn't protecting us from the incoming fucking debris, and actually it would act as a magnet to all these near misses that they keep talking about. The only reason that we haven't caught one of those near misses is because of the moon. Because of the magnetics involved. So if the moon's closer to us in order to cause those sea levels, one of those near misses is going to get us. Yeah. One of those near misses turns into a direct hit. And that's the aggravating part about this, is that nobody wants to talk about it because they're scared shitless about it. And it's like, bro, just fucking live your life. Stop fucking groveling at the feet of these people, and just fucking realize it and move on. Like, oh, hey, here in the next 30 years, there's going to be a catastrophic fucking a catastrophic event that results in 50% of the human population dying. It's happened so many times at this point in time, and we're still here. Mm-hmm. And every time we come back better.
Not even to say it's that we're still here. All of us, every single one of us, are the progeny of those who survived it. Not only
that, but the fact that we went from the Copper Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, and now we're in the Industrial. To the point that we have completely revamped our ability to sustain ourselves. To the point where, like, one of the things I'm thinking about is, hey, a small steam engine. Because mind you, the only thing that's gonna be fucking working when this shit finally happens and goes the way that we are pretty sure it's gonna go is steam power is going to be the main thing. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, I've got a small steam engine that allows me to continue running my fucking well.
Well, actually, if I may be pedantic for a moment, when has steam power not been the primary, like...
Oh, yeah, of course.
Everything from nuclear to oil to coal has just been steam power. It's just the method in which we heat the water in which to turn it into steam.
Yeah, it's become more efficient. It's become more efficient. And that's the point.
Even nuclear is just a way to heat a lot of water in order to create steam, turn turbines to create steam power.
Yep.
It's all just steam.
Yep.
Dave Newell is the king of the world.
Is that what he meant by steamedpower.com?
Yes. Yes.
But no, and I understand that you understand this, but I really want to drive this home where you have so much to look forward to, but you're allowing these people to have control over your lives in ways that are absolutely fucking pathetic. And I'm not saying that as a criticism or as an attack. I'm saying that as I feel pity for you. I feel pity for the people who allow this shit to control them. Me, I've gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, me personally, I look at the shit that's going on in Israel, look at the shit that's going on in Ukraine, and I look at it from the perspective of, this is the old order that is flailing around trying to survive when the new world is upon us. Yep. Do you think the Russians don't know about this shit? Do you think the Chinese don't know about this shit?
Nope, they know about it.
You're fucking retarded. You're fucking retarded if you think they don't know about this shit. And they're playing the fucking long game. There's a reason why World War III is going to... the only way World War III kicks off in this fucking time period is if the fucking Europeans actually get their war. That's the only fucking way. Yeah. Everybody who's talking...
Well, and then the city of London gets to bail itself out. Oops. Or not bail itself. It gets to default because of... It's a war now. We can default on all our debts.
Yeah, like they've done every single goddamn fucking time there's a war.
Oh, yeah. Yep. It's a war. We're involved in a war now. Oopsie daisy. We can just now default on all this debt. Where have I heard that before from the fucking city of London?
Yeah. Well, and that's the ridiculous part about it, is that at the end of the fucking day, if you're going to actively allow yourself to be controlled by this, if you're actively going to, then I feel pity for you, because it's like, you know what? Fine, go ahead. Me and my fellows and my fellow pilgrims are going to move on without you. And when we, at a certain point, when we are the ones surviving and you're the ones dying, because here's the thing. If I could do what I want to do right now, I would show up to my mom's and I'd be like, hey, where's the well? I'd be pouring a concrete pad and I'd be setting up a fucking steam engine to get that, to make it so that when this shit fucking happens, that well is going to continue running no matter what. Fucking go cut down some timber, boys. We can season like 3 or 4 trees while we use another tree for fucking fueling the fire. And then proceed to fucking and proceed to be able to survive whatever the fuck stupid bullshit, and be able to, because that's what's going to kill everybody is fucking cholera. Like, these big cities, it's not going to be like, that's why I would immediately get away from the fucking city, because it's like, oh, I can't drink any of the water around here because it's all fucking infested with cholera. And that's what's going to kill the majority of people. So it's like, sorry guys, like, I don't give a fuck at this point in time. Get over yourselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, while I would love to get the ranch set up and get everything going and be able to invite you and your wife onto the ranch, which Varg, I am, or Dale, I am extending that invitation readily. The fact of the matter is that it's like that's the only goal I have at this point in time, is find a nice little spot in the mountains that are elevated enough that when this whole shit show fucking happens, it's like, oh, I don't give a fuck about the big wave. The big wave ain't gonna touch the fucking center of the country anyways. It's gonna come out one of the coastlines. Hopefully it comes at the eastern coastline, because it's like, the Ecotopians, we can handle them later. The fucking East Coast, I'll fucking wipe that bitch out. I don't give a fuck at this point. It's like Washington, D.C., Washington underwater. But yeah.
If only. We can only hope. We can only hope that Washington, D.C. ends up underwater.
But we can go ahead and we can actually tie this up. We can save this discussion and kind of do other things with this topic for another episode. So anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope you guys enjoyed. That was the vice presidential debate, presumptive nominees, or presumptive candidates, I should say. And we'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.
Have a good night, all you fucking motherfuckers. Stay safe.